Welcome to the third and final video of this series. The main focus will be about strategy. We will look into the different stages of the game, specific features on a map to look at, CO matchup, a few extra fog tips, power charge management, and stalling. The idea is to analyze all these factors together to form a cohesive step-by-step game plan, or strategy. The first thing we need to talk about are the three basic stages of the game: early, mid, and late game. Consider these as the natural timeline of any given match. The early game starts on day 1 and it includes the capture phase, openings, and the very first few engagements. Mid game starts when capture phase ends, leading to a flood of infantry moving into contested areas synchronized with a constant stream of vehicles. This stage will see lots of fighting over the contested cities. Late game is when fighting stops, armies pull back and stare at each other, where unit count and unit value will start to pile up. This can lead into more and more tech ups, and could theoretically lead into a megatank endgame, where each player gets to the unit limit of 50 megatanks. This theoretical endgame never happens, but it's important to understand that it exists. The natural flow of these stages is early game into mid game with lots of brawling over cities. In some games there can be a late game where armies regroup and build up until they clash in a big battle, trading down unit value and unit count, which takes us back into a mid game. These last two stages can kind of go back and forth forever because income from properties in this game is infinite. You will always receive income at the start of your turn, no matter how long the game goes. Basically, you want to have a plan for your early game with an efficient capture phase along with a solid opening, whether it's an aggressive one to interrupt captures or a defensive one to protect your own. Have a plan for the first and maybe only mid-game of the match, where the infantry flood is very strong and should be supported with vehicles to put pressure. You also want to work on having a strong balanced army composition in the mid-game. And if your CO is the stallier one of the matchup, then consider having a mid-game where you achieve equal income or just slightly behind in income, and then try to take it to a late-game scenario by pulling back and defending your own cities while unit count and unit value pile up in your CO's favor. Now that we understand the natural timeline of a match, let's look at how you can form a strategy to have a plan for every stage of the game. The three main things that will determine your strategy will be the map, your CO, and your opponent's CO. Let's look at some key features in maps that should help you decide what CO to pick and to come up with an initial strategy. First, check how many bases there are per player. Is it a 2-base, 3-base, or 4-base map? Usually the more bases there are, the more infantry there will be. But more accurately, it is 2 base areas that have more infantry while 1 base areas tend to struggle with maintaining infantry numbers. 2-base or base light maps tend to see a lot of copters, since it helps to increase unit count and infantry count. Now, because of the reduced army and infantry count, artillery tend to be a bit less viable since there's less units to cover it. And because there's less infantry walls, there tends to be more vehicle against vehicle engagements. Rachel tends to be more viable in base light as well, due to it being harder to redirect her missiles with the classic infantry ball as infantry numbers become scarce. Mixed base maps usually see a lot of early fighting where strong day-to-day COs can shine. Look at how many airports there are per player and where they are located on the map. The closer to the front lines an airport is, the faster of an impact air units will have, since they'll be able to attack within less turns, and the less time the other player will have to prepare for them. How fast the airport comes online is important too. Sometimes it's 1 turn away from your base, sometimes it's far away. This will determine how soon air units will be deployed. Look at the position of the airport relative to your bases. You can think of airports like half a base, in the sense that it will boost the strength in that area. For example, in base light, your strong side could be determined by the airport, if it's towards one side of the map and close to one of your bases. In a 3-base map, if the airport is on your strong side, resulting in a 2-base, 1 airport versus 1 base setup, then that can accelerate a damage race or even a base trade. And if it's on your weak side, resulting in a 2-base versus 1 base, 1 airport setup, then it kind of balances things out a bit. In mixed base maps, the 1 base areas with airport won't be as weak, and the 1 base areas without airport can sometimes get overwhelmed. Take a look at the terrain in the map, specifically in the contested areas. How choky or open is it? Arties and copters will thrive in choky areas, while tanks will thrive in open areas. Copters and air units in general also love when there's terrain like mountains, rivers, and sea that will split the fronts in the map. This enables air units to fly around and switch fronts very quickly, while land units can't. It can make it really hard for anti-airs to chase air units, sometimes even forcing multiple anti-airs to be bought for maybe a single copter. Check how many comm towers there are per player. 1 per player is the standard, 2 towers tend to favor more aggressive strategies, and 0 comm towers tend to favor more stally strats. This is simply because the more firepower, the easier it is to eliminate units in 1 or 2 hits, which makes it easier to wall break. Take a look at the size of the map, specifically how far are the bases from the front lines. Maybe even check how many turns a tank would take to arrive to the front lines. Every mode is a bit different, like standard will tend to be around 1 to 2 turns, high funds will be around 2 to 3 turns, and fog will be around 2 to 4 turns. Smaller maps will tend to favor aggressiveness, while larger maps will tend to favor stalliness. This is because the larger the map, the more time you have to prepare for threats, and there will usually be more unit buildup, causing big army fights or stare downs instead of small brawls throughout the map. This can result in more power charged, which can benefit strong power COs like global damage ones. Analyze how easy it will be to front switch from one side to another. The easier and faster it is to front switch, the more it can benefit an aggressive and adaptive approach. This will favor tanks mostly and will hinder slower units like infantry, artillery, mechs, and medium tanks. Check what the income of the map will look like. The higher the income will mean more vehicles and less infantry. Possibly more tech ups, and powers will get charged and used quicker. If the income is low, it will put a bigger emphasis on flipping cities. For example, being down 2k income when you're at 27k and they're at 29k is not that big of a deal, but being down 2k income when you're at 13k and they are at 15k can be. If the map is very likely to see base trading, then you could consider a more aggressive CO to facilitate overrunning your opponent's base. Or you can consider a stallier CO and focus on defending your base instead of overrunning theirs. The same concept can apply if the map is likely to be an HQ rush, where Sami can be a very viable option. Some maps have extra features like pre-deployed transports that can be used to speed up captures and maybe make mechs more viable. Or important pipe seams to break, where deciding when to invest on busting them open can be pretty important, since they will probably have a long-term reward for a short-term risk. Now that you've looked at all these aspects in the map, you can look at the COs available and try to think of the best strategy for each CO. In what ways can each CO make the best of their abilities by exploiting the features of the map? For example, if it's base light, with strong airports, choky terrain, and it's hard for land units to front switch, then air units will be extremely benefited. This will very rarely be the case. Usually maps will be fairly balanced so that they don't over-centralize over one single strategy, so it's important to consider all of the map's aspects and not get tunnel visioned with only one of them. Usually, most if not all COs in the tier will have a viable yet different strategy for a given map. What can help to come up with different strategies is to think of the stages of the game that we mentioned earlier. Try to keep in mind what stages of the game most benefit each CO. When looking at aggressive COs, try to come up with aggressive openings, putting pressure early, interrupting captures and forcing fights. And when looking at stallier COs, look at how to defend from those aggressive openings, and ideally reach to a mid-game with minimal fighting to be able to take it into a late-game scenario. Once you've picked your CO and hit start, you will finally be able to see your opponent's CO. So, the next step is to analyze which CO from this matchup is the stalliest. You want to think who would benefit the most from not fighting and taking it to a late game scenario. This will either reinforce or drastically change how you should play your CO. Some COs will most likely always want to have an aggressive approach, and some a defensive approach, but there's some that are a bit in the middle. For example, in Tier 2 Fog, Max will always want to go aggressive, Eagle will always want to stall, but with Olaf it will depend. If the opponent is Max, then Olaf will want to stall. But if the opponent is Eagle, then Olaf will want to be aggressive. If you haven't already, try to think of your opponent's CO's strengths and weaknesses. What is a likely approach that they'll go for? What opening do you think they might go for? Now think of ways that you can counter this with your CO's strengths. Try to think of the different time windows or power spikes that the combination between the map and the CO matchup might have, and keep that in mind to have the most possible effective counters and obtain the most amount of advantages. For example, if you have an aggressive CO with a strong day-to-day like Lash, facing a stally global damage CO like Drake, then you will want to gain as many early advantages as possible. Consider an aggressive opening, try to stop captures, abuse of the extra firepower from terrain to cripple Drake's economy and army as much as possible. Ideally, you will get to a mid-game with a comfortable income and army lead to weather out Drake's very powerful Typhoon. On the other hand, if you're Drake and you're facing a Lash, then always keep in mind what Lash might want to do and constantly try to counter it. You can do this by sending units wherever they are trying to pressure you, or instead try to pressure elsewhere and force them to either split the armies to try to win everywhere, which is very unlikely, or commit and go for a damage race, which actually global damage COs are very good at. In the case of a mirror matchup, which means that both of you pick the same CO, then you will kind of have the same strategy, so having the better opening tends to be crucial. It usually just comes down to whoever can achieve the income lead, and in most cases the first power. In summary, you want to have a plan for the map with the CO you picked, and once you know the matchup, consider maybe tweaking this strategy. Try to exploit your CO strengths with the features of the map, and try to predict and counter whatever your opponent might throw at you. At a certain point, it stops being a matter of who can get the better engagements or punishing mistakes, because higher level players will simply be more consistently good. So it can sometimes just boil down to each player's strategy and how well they can execute that strategy. The more experience you get, you will begin to understand that usually there isn't one best CO or one best strategy for a map. So feel free to experiment, get creative, and surprise your opponents. And have fun, because that's why we play this game in the first place, am I right? Now let's look at a map and tier to visualize all of these concepts. We have here the map called Naranja, and we'll look into tier 2. Let's start off with the bases. So we have one base, and one base, and one base. So that means there's 2 bases per player. This is a base light map. It is also mixed base. As you can see, you have one base over here versus this base, and versus this base. If we look at the airports, there is already pre-owned airports here, 2 of them, which is a lot. And then there's another one over here. And this one's right next to this base. So you could maybe think that this is like the strong side because it adds more units. Versus this is like the more like the weaker base, and a stronger base. As you can see, these airports, they're like some of them are pre-owned, and this one will come online super fast. It's right next to the base, so you can predict that air units will have an importance very, very early on into the match. If we look at the terrain, you can see that there's a lot of sea tiles here, a lot of sea tiles here, and there's also a lot of mountains here and rivers, kind of like cutting through the fronts of the map. Except for here, this is like the more open area, and then you have again all this dense terrain. So you can think copters will have a really good time just flying over the sea tiles, also front switching from one state to another because of this hard terrain, these mountains and rivers. They can fly from one side to another. You can also see that artillery will have a really good time here. They can really use all of this heavy terrain. Like look at this choke point right here. It's ideal for artillery. Well, you can have an artillery come and sit right here on this tile and kind of point over there. So this is all very in favor of artillery. But in this area, this is like the more open area. So this is more like tank area. More open and easier for tanks to swing by from one side to another and pressure different parts. So you got like tank area, artillery, and these 2 are like artillery areas, and then you got, or even from here you can make an artillery over here defensively and have it here pointing to that little choke point area. And copters is like everywhere, just sea tiles and mountains. If we look at the comm towers, there's just 1 per player, so that's pretty standard. Regarding the size of the map, it's kind of like medium size. A tank will take about 2 turns from over here, like 1 and just 2 turns to get over here, or maybe it goes like this and then it goes over here. So like 2 turns or 3 turns for this base, and like from here it's much faster. A tank from over here can already be in the middle in 1 turn over here. So definitely these bases in the middle will have like 1 or 2 turn action, and this one will be like 2 to 3 turns. If we look at front switching, definitely tanks will have a hard time front switching from this avenue into this one. They can do so very well and very nicely over here. But this means that copters will have a really good time just flying over this and harassing maybe the middle base, or maybe even defending it as well. If you look at income, it's going to be 18k income per player if everything is capped and equal, which is kind of like medium income, so nothing special about it. Regarding base trading, this map does definitely can definitely see base trading, especially regarding the middle base, because it's all alone, and this base will be stronger and it kind of will pour down and maybe harass this base. There's all these little choke points where you can use artillery to slowly push forward, so definitely it is a base trade scenario for this map. So you could go with an aggressive CO and try to base trade, or you can go with a stallier CO and try to defend the base instead. HQ rush, this map is not an HQ rush because the lab is over here, very well protected. And regarding extra features, there are a lot of them. So we got these mechs right here, and you can go and pick it up with your lander, which is going to take 3 turns to arrive. And you can pick it up and drop it off over here and start capping the port or the city. It's just like a little bit of a faster income, I guess, with the mech. And it's also a free unit that can then walk over these mountains and help the push down into the middle base. Besides that, the lander, after going and picking up the mech and dropping it off here, it can actually just drive down and maybe sit on this port to prevent the green players from capping. It can come to this port and prevent green players from capping it, but it can also just come down over here on this corridor and be a really nice blocker to defend the middle base. And you can put an artillery over here, and then tanks are going to have a really hard time to break through over here. And another thing you can do with a lander, instead of doing all of those options, you could just put it over here. Because there's another feature, which is the cruiser, and this cruiser is supposed to deter these air units from coming from these airports, and so you can block it and just prevent the cruiser from coming by. The thing is that you would lose on having the mech, which also means extra income and an extra unit to push forward, so it's definitely a drawback. But maybe, I don't know, you want to use these as, you want to make copters from here, so that could be an option. But if you don't, and you just pick up the mech and stuff, then this cruiser will just come around and it can sit on this port defensively and prevent air units from freely moving around in the sea, pretty much. So it's definitely an important unit to be used, the cruiser. Now that we've looked at everything from the map, let's talk about the COs available. So if you look at Sammy, if we are the orange player, one thing that Sammy has going for her is the lander that will get to the mech faster. It will get there in 2 turns instead of 3 turns because of the extra movement. She'll have a free mech, which she will always love to have. So, she can have it here capping these things at first, and then it can be used to help pressure the one base in the middle. So that's really nice. And another thing is that because it's very choky and there isn't really much front switching from this base, that's really good for artillery and mechs and infantry that are just slower and they like to creep forward slowly and take over the base. She can get a victory march and maybe flip the base in just 1 turn. You can make T-copters from this airport over here and kind of ferry around mechs pretty nicely. You make it the first turn and it comes over here and it's already moving over there, and then you just make more mechs and they kind of fly even closer, they can drop over this mountain. There's definitely a lot of things that you can do, and they get into the action really, really fast. If you consider max, for example, instead of doing that, you can use copters very efficiently. You won't be able to have artillery because look at that range, that is really bad. So you will probably want to use a lot of copters, and so you can use them to strike from these mountain ranges. They can fly around different areas. They're gonna have plus movement with the powers. He'll have a really good time taking over the middle with tanks early because he's pretty much unbeatable, or kind of early on with the tanks, and they can kind of front switch from one side to another, and then once the copters come around, it's going to help him a lot to prevent these artilleries from kind of taking over his base. If we look at Olaf, he's going to be the stallier of the 3 that we've mentioned so far, so maybe instead of wanting to go for a base trade, he might want to defend his base instead, make artillery defensively, make a medium tank, make a rocket even, you make a rocket over here, and it can kind of, it will deter all of this push. It will prevent an artillery from base locking and mechs and stuff like that, so he can maybe play the game that way. But if there's Eagle, with Eagle you will most definitely want to play like that, very, very stally, and just try to defend and then wait for a lightning strike to just destroy all of the army or take over their base. And if you're Olaf against an Eagle, then you will want to go aggressive because you can't really stall against Eagle because Eagle is just going to demolish you with lightning strike. So Olaf is kind of in the middle of wanting to play defensively or aggressively. So as you can see, there's just a lot of things that go on, and It's gonna be, there isn't like one way of playing the map. There's many different options, and every CO is gonna have different things going for them and different strategies that they can go for. It just depends maybe what you want to do, and just also how effectively you can execute that strategy. In the previous video, we looked into some common openers on all three modes. There's nothing wrong with just sticking with what already works, but you can also try to come up with something new. You can simulate on the move planner the first few turns for both players, and by following a simple capture phase, you'll be able to identify who will be the first one to get a tank out, in standard for example. And you can experiment whether opening with an RD or a recon a turn or two earlier achieves anything, if it breaks the usual map development in a way that favors you, of course. Maybe it doesn't and opening tank is better, that's fine, but you'll be able to surprise your opponents sometimes with this. On the same topic of openers, in Fog you can move planner transport or recon openers to see how far you can get away with this. If you make a recon, you want to harass infantry, so simulating with a move planner will help you see where your opponent's infantry will most likely be, so you know what cities to harass, and plan their turn as if they were opening with tank, so you know which captures to harass before that tank could defend them. Maybe, in the way you spot an enemy recon, this means that their first tank will be delayed even further, therefore enabling your recon to harass more infantry safely. Openers really are extremely map dependent, so looking at the map's features that we talked about earlier and running move planner simulations of a basic capture phase will let you experiment and try out different openings and see what they'd be able to achieve. Now, this might seem obvious, but vision is so incredibly important in Fog. There are many aspects to this, but I want to talk about two of them that play a very big role in Fog matches. First, it's the first few units you spot from the enemy, especially vehicles, because not only can you backtrack and identify when that vehicle was built, but you can also calculate when their next vehicle would be. This is very important to do when you're opening with recon so you can get the most damage in before an enemy tank arrives. You'll be able to gain as many early advantages as possible. The second aspect is when armies build up. Those moments where you don't know if you should push on one side or switch to the other side. You might have a very strong balanced army, but if you have no vision you won't be able to use it effectively. Recons are so important in scenarios like these. Park them on contested cities or forests, get vision of where the enemy army is, and potentially identify key new units in their composition so you can have the right counter. Knowing where and what army lies in the fog will enable you to take better decisions of what to do with your army. So, remember when I said in the first video that the only element of decision making you have are your units? Well, I lied. There's one more, and that is when to activate your CO powers. Global damage COs are very easy in this regard, because they will always just want to press the button as soon and as frequently possible because there's nothing to plan. One click and 20% of the enemy army is gone. But the rest of the COs will want to get the most out of their powers. A very well used or very poorly used power can sometimes determine the fate of the match. You don't have to use your powers as soon as you have them. You can hold on to your powers to either create threats or to simply have a stronger power in a few turns. For example, movement power COs like Adder or Max can hold their power to position their units just one tile away from attacks, which means that if the opponent has a non-movement power CO like Grim or Olaf, then they have to position their units 2 tiles away from attacks to prevent getting struck by a strong power next turn. This can push back the non-movement CO, forcing them off of cities and conceding important areas of the map. One good tool you can use against global damage COs is to overcharge their powers. For this, you can carefully manage how much charge they are getting, and as they get close to full charge, position your units so that they can't get full charge on their turn with some engagements. Then, you want to ideally look for a turn where you use your power and deal a huge amount of damage, overcharging their power as much as possible. You can do this against any CO, but it tends to be one of the only tools against global damage COs. It is important to identify the moments where it is better for you to simply stall. This may be because you have the better late game or stallier CO, or maybe because you've secured enough of an advantage and income lead that you can simply sit back and let your unit value pile up. This doesn't mean to pull back all of your forces to the corner of the map. To stall is a fine balance between defending and putting pressure at the same time, so as not to lose control of the match. In Fog, you will want lots of vision so you can send your army wherever their army is headed for. For this reason, I suggest trying out staller COs if you haven't already. Use your knowledge to have good openings and tactics so you can ideally achieve equal income, and then sit back and defend your cities. Let the enemy come to you, and let your CO's power do their magic. It is very easy to succumb to the urge of yeeting your troops just to see stuff blow up. So I strongly recommend practicing how to stall. You can do this with stall your COs, but also with any CO once you have a very solid lead. With this, we have reached the end of this video and of the series. Hopefully, these tips and tools will help you achieve many victories and get those sweet ELO points and tournament wins. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.